I'm Chair of the Library Board of Trustees, and I want to welcome all of you for our community forum for the Town Council candidates. Don Riley is going to be our moderator for the forum, and I'm going to turn everything over to him.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. This is the second candidate forum that we've held in the last couple of years. I'm not here tonight in any official capacity as moderator. I'm just going to moderate this event. Mary and Heather have coordinated to put this together as a community service. And I'm delighted to see the number of people who have shown up despite the fact that it was missed in the banner. The objective tonight is several pieces to the objective. It's not a debate. We're not going to have any back and forth between the candidates. The real purpose is to maximize the candidate discussion around the questions. I have a number of prepared questions, and I have several citizen questions, and we invite all of you who have questions that you'd like answered. Please write them on a piece of paper and get them up to me, and we'll try to work them in. A lot's going to depend on timing. And I'll try to adjust the group of questions I have based on the amount of questions I get from you, because I think your questions are more important probably than mine. I should point out that the questions have not been shared with the candidates. They don't have a clue what's coming at them tonight. It's a real opportunity for everyone here and for everyone who reads the article that Brendan's going to publish to get to know the candidates and how they think about certain issues that are germane to the current environment. You become a much more informed constituency when you understand how those guys think. Before we deal with the two candidates for the at-large position, I'd like to give each of the unopposed council candidates an opportunity to share their thoughts with you. And I'm going to give them each 2 minutes to tell you about themselves and a little bit about what they bring to the council position, so that you have an understanding of of what they're thinking about as well. So, without further ado, two of you here. Rob Duhame, the third candidate, apparently is not going to be able to join us this evening. He was questionable whether or not he could make it, so he's not going to be able to make it. I'd like to invite Don Winterton and Nancy Kamai come up and just use the mic, and I'll give you 2 minutes, and it's going to be time.
Ready? Set? Go. My name's Don Winterton. I'm a graduate of Central High School. Probably want to tell you who and why I'm here. I'm a graduate of Central High School. I'm a graduate of the University of New Hampshire. I was a member of state championship football teams and basketball teams at Central High. Early in my life, I started refereeing basketball. That doesn't have much to do. However, I refereed 18 New Hampshire championship years in a row. I'm the only person from New Hampshire who was on the Big East refereeing list. So you can say anything you want to me, because I've been yelled at by more famous people than anybody in this room. In my work life, my last job, I was the National Director of Sales for IDEC Pharmaceuticals. I headed a sales force of 93 people across the country, and we were really successful. And we were successful because we worked hard, we built a good culture. I don't work anymore. One of the reasons that this seat is open is because Mike Downer works real hard. I'm the opposite of Mike Downer. I used to fly all around the country all the time. I don't anymore. I built a house in Hooksett. We moved in September of 2011. That sounds like I'm new to town. Well, guess what? My great-grandmother was George Roby's sister. So we're not new to Hooksett. And her relatives were named Prescott. I live on Prescott Heights Road. When I came to Hooksett, I built a nice house, and I ran into a culture that was not good. I ran into a culture that was not good. There's a long story, and if you want to read it, you can read it in the minutes of the meetings. However, I was not treated nicely by this town, and this culture needed to change. I eventually settled out of court with the town of Hooksett. So that you know, the town of Hooksett paid me $7,000. It's public, no one was at fault. However, if you can't beat them, join them. Since then, I've been an alternate member of the planning board, a full-time member of the planning board, member of the CIP committee, assistant moderator, and for the election and the town election. I think smaller government's better than bigger, but I want to listen.
Thank you. Nancy, you have.
Did we get the other candidate?
Rob?
Yeah.
Come on up.
Saw you come in with that tie on.
Yeah.
Cleans up well, doesn't it?
I didn't get a chance to shake it.
2 minutes, and I neglected to say at the outset, I will stand up when you have 15 seconds.
Sure.
That way you'll know.
Would you like me to go next?
Okay.
So I'll give you a
Yeah,
chance
sure,
to settle in a little?
sure.
Okay. My name is Nancy Comey. I came to Hooksett in 1989 and have grown 2 children. I left work several years ago and went right back to school and got my business degree, master's at SNU, and with that decided to put it in practical application and went right onto the budget committee. I knew that in time I was going to become a town councilor eventually when George Longfellow was going to retire. He had asked me out of sheer legacy to just pass the torch. And when I was on the budget committee, I worked on the CIP committee. I really pushed purchase versus lease. I pushed the IT inventory so that we could figure out what we needed for future IT. I am not a yes man, so that I was one of the 9 budget committee members at the time who voted for the non-union wage employees to get a raise, who hadn't seen a raise in a while. I'm a 2-term vice chair and hope to again get your votes to come back on the seat and become vice chair again. I was on the fire union negotiation committee, the budget committee alternate, perambulation committee. I was recently the chair of the cable committee because I feel like we should very much have that cable PEG access channel. While I support the process and I feel that we've made a lot of progress and that we are moving in the right direction, my platform is this. I wanted to become part of local government because I think one person can make a difference. I also feel that when I'm ready to sell my house, I want it to be worth something. And I will pass the legacy again on to the next person that wants to be town council when that time comes, but I hope to be here for the long haul. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pretty good.
15 seconds short. You still have 10, you want to take them?
I'm a traveling salesman, I guess you could say. I have 19 sales centers in northern New England, so big responsibility.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Rob, I haven't had a chance to meet you. Don Riley.
Yeah, you have Don. Maybe that's all right. That's all right. I was a young man.
You have 2 minutes.
I'm sorry.
You have 2 minutes, and I'll stand up when you have 15 seconds.
Yeah, I moved to Hooksett in 1972. I graduated from Village Elementary, went to Hooksett Memorial, and graduated from West High School. I have a wife, 2 kids. I've been running a landscape company in Hooksett for the last 29, almost 30 years. I've done 10 years on the planning board. Almost all those years I did the CIP, except there was a little missing part where I got off the planning board, and the best thing I did was chide Mr. Witherton and say, no, you can't have it, you got to have a sprinkler system, and it was the best thing I ddid. And then a pleasure I had of Nancy Comey on the budget committee. I begged for a budget committee person, and I got one, and what a great start she was. I mean, it worked out really well. My planning hat is the biggest thing I love about this town. You know, if you remember, 4 years ago there were fields and farms still in Hooksett, and that's all changed. And my memory is my ally and my worst enemy at the same time. Some people don't want to hear what part of the town I want to see saved and what part I want to see changed. And not everybody enjoys my same views, but I try to look at it from their point of view and represent the citizens of Hooksett. And as a planner, I tell people, you know, last 3 or 4 years, especially with the economy going down, I'm on the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission representing Hooksett, and a lot of town planning boards weren't meeting. There hasn't been any growth. Hooksett has 3 highway exits, just unheard of in New Hampshire. For planning, for the growth of this town, it's not when, if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. Hooksett's a great town. I tell people in landscaping, growth is good for business, bad for the neighborhood. You can't have it both ways. You want it both ways, but the biggest thing on that is, as a landscaper, I enjoy the rural character of New Hampshire and especially Hooksett, and I'd like to see some of that remain. So, that's it.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, you guys can step to the back of the room, have a seat.
Questions? Okay.
That is it.
That was easy.
Time for the main event.
David Ross.
I will invite Mr. Mibel and Mr. Ross to come to the table. I can't find a good position to position the clock, so you guys can see it as well, and I can see it.
I probably won't even look at it. If you stand up, that'd be
We're
fine.
going to use the same format. Mark Mibel and David Ross are candidates for the one at-large position on the council for 2013. Plan tonight is to give each of the candidates 1 minute to do what I term an elevator speech, and that is to just tell you about themselves, but they get 1 minute to do that. I'll then ask specific questions that are already prepared, and they'll have 2 minutes to respond. As you just saw, the same discipline is going to apply. I'll stand up with 15 seconds to go, and I will call you at 2 minutes. There may be a question or two that is responded to that begs an extemporaneous question, and I'll try to use judgment in terms of stepping in with that extemporaneous question, because I don't want to be an impediment to the discussion this evening. So, but if it's appropriate, I will do that. And I've already got another question for this that was passed forward. So if you have questions, pass them up, and we'll try to work them in. Running rules. Since this is not a debate, there's no back and forth between the two candidates. I will not allow that. To maximize the information exchange, the focus should be on the question itself. And I would ask that the candidates respond only to the question that's asked. Personality issues, personal disagreements are not relevant this evening, so none of that. I would like to keep it casual and informative because I think that maximizes the amount of information everybody gets. And let's have some fun along the way. And I would really stress that everybody here should get to know these two people. I'll point out that each of you have a pad of paper and some pencils because several of these questions are multiple part questions, and it's all one question. Okay. What I'll do is alternate who goes first. So, Ross, Mibel, we'll go alphabetically. Mark?
Yes.
1 minute.
All right. Well, first I want to thank everyone for coming. I appreciate all your interest in the town. Those of you who are here are just as interested in the town as I am. And we're all passionate about our town of Hooksett, and which is why we're all here. A little bit about myself. I have lived in town for 11 years. I originally graduated from St. Anselm College on a political science degree. Moved here 11 years ago. Became like a lot of you here, became interested in how the town is operating and started attending meetings back in 2008, and it started by asking a simple question of the town council. I proceeded to go to the police commission meetings for the next, almost every meeting for the next 4 years after that, because I became interested in the operations of the town government. So I became interested in town and want to pursue that further. Thank you.
David, 1 minute.
All right, hi, I'm David Ross. I think almost everybody in this room does know me fairly well. So I'm self-employed. I've lived in Hooksett since 2001. Prior to that, I lived up in Belmont. There I served on the Conservation Commission and was a gadfly at town meetings and things like that. And I've always been pretty politically active since the early 80s. After moving to Hooksett, I proceeded to do what I did there, which is write letters to the editor and become involved to some extent on the peripherals of different town government proceedings. I've served on the town council. In 2006, I got elected based on a challenge, which I took, and I'm glad I did. It opened my eyes to a whole new facet of life, literally. And I did enjoy the time serving. In 2009, the economy started to crash, and in 2010, I waited until 2010 so they could fill my seat with another election. And since that time, I've, been kind of being on the peripherals, online, checking things out, and hearing from people, and it's still never really left me that I wanted to serve the town still some more, so that's why I'm running now.
Thank you. What single unique talent or skill will you use to successfully deal with the wide range of issues, actions, challenges, and decisions you will face as the counselor? In other words, why should people vote for you, but focus on the talent or skill that you bring? David.
Well, I've prided myself in being able to deal with people from all facets of life. My best training for what I do today was early in life as working in restaurants, everything from a dishwasher to a bartender. I can deal with many different types of people in high official places. I've testified up in Concord many times in front of committees. And so I'm very comfortable with a variety of people and boards and commissions. I do have an understanding of propriety in meetings and do hold highly to politeness. That's one of my key ingredients that I bring, I think, because having a long listening, in other words, being quick to listen and slow to speak is an important thing. That was one of the things that took me a while to learn early on in the council, but I did learn. And and I've been told by others that they were very impressed with my service and my ways of coming to decisions based on the questions at hand as they were brought forward to the council. And that's what I'm going to bring. I will handle each question by itself, not in light of other things or looking through a particular prism, if you will. I will, when it comes to a question, because that's what the council does. The council basically makes decisions. They don't run the town. The council basically guides the town and governs the town and makes sure that things are going the way they should. And that's pretty much about it, I guess. That's what I see the council as. It's more of an oversight, if you will. We have an administrator who actually does the day-to-day duties, and then we have department heads which run their different departments, etc. So, and there you have it.
Thank you. You still have a couple of seconds left.
Well, again, politeness and propriety are two big issues. And I learned that early on because I was not a very proper person at meetings sometimes. And I learned what it was like to be on the other side.
Thank you, David. Mark?
What I bring to my seeking this position is I'm a strict adherent to process. And whenever I go to these meetings, the town council has a right to deliberate and review all of their agenda items. And but in my view, I examine the process by which that is happening. And at any given time where I provide public input at these meetings, I'm examining and providing feedback back to the council or the school board or the police commission. The fact that if they're making decisions, they need to do them the right way. I am a problem solver by nature. My job is a manager, my full-time job. I manage all of New England for my company. I'm a supervisor for that, a unit manager. And every day I solve problems, big problems, that deal with food manufacturers, major manufacturers who come to visit my area. So there are important, crucial things for me to accomplish on a daily basis with serious ramifications if it doesn't work out. So I examine process, and I'm a problem solver. My goal is to examine the most clearly defined means to clearly defined goals, and I approach that on a daily basis as I do on a regular basis, and in my approach to my work in town as a budget committee member and the chairman of the budget committee for the last 3 years of the 5 years that I've served on the budget committee. The other thing is I do my homework. I always come to a meeting fully prepared to deliberate and review everything that needs to be discussed on that agenda that evening. I come prepared. There is no slight or prepared thought that I don't know what's going on, or I contribute information. I'm a fact data-driven guy, and providing that information to the council or the board that I'm serving on to make sure that we're all making well-informed decisions.
Thank you. I'm going to shorten the answer for this next question to a minute because I think you've covered pieces of it already. Describe your philosophy regarding the role of a town council. Mark?
Yep. So the town council is primarily a policy board. It's not an administrative board. So they examine the general direction of how the town is to be operated through the town administrator who works for the town council. So in my view of it, is the town council representatives through their districts represent the constituents within those districts. For ourselves, we're at large, either one of us here will be representing the entire town. There are 3 at-larges, but so the constituents might contact a counselor with any particular issue. We would bring it up at our meetings and/or bring it up to the town administrator, who will disperse that problem or issue that needs to be resolved through other department heads. But again, we're primarily a policy board where we overlook, if you will, about 30,000 feet general policy decisions.
Thank you. David?
Well, it is kind of in the definition. That is what it is. We define policy. We set procedures and rules in place. We have to make decisions based on ordinances, things of that nature. It's more than just being a representative, though, because that's another thing I find, that we are a democratic republic, even though it's even in town government. When I was a councilor for District 4, I would get calls from people from other parts of the town. I would still listen to their concerns, because once you're part of that 9-member body, you are part of the governing body of the town. So even though I will be at large and would be, answering phones, before that didn't matter to me. And it shouldn't to any other councilor, I think. Once you're on the council, you are entrusted with the operations of the town to make sure things operate well. So I would be, answering to everybody in town.
Thank you. Next question has 3 parts to it. Actually, 4 parts. So be ready to write. During the past 5 years or so, many citizens have been elected to town or school district offices only to resign before completing the elected term. So the parts are: describe the circumstances where you believe it is appropriate to resign prematurely. Describe the consideration you would make when considering whether to formally accept or formally reject a resignation by an official who must tender the resignation through the council. And finally, is resignation timing an issue? And if so, how does this affect your decision in terms of accepting or rejecting a resignation? David, I think you're up.
Okay, and unfortunately I will take the mantle as being the one that started a very bad precedent in this town, because prior to my resignation I couldn't recall of another one from the council, and so it was a little troubling to see that pattern repeated, and I almost felt I had some personal responsibility in it, because that was one of my jokes to the other councilors. When things would get tough, I say, hey, you could always quit, But the thing is that it is appropriate when your family comes first, and that's all there is to that. And that was my situation, and there's no more needs to be said about that. Any person that doesn't put their family before everything else in their life, is derelict in their first duty as a father. The terms of acceptance, again, if there's a legitimate reason why someone says they can't serve any longer, either because of work requirements or other things like that, there is a time, granted, it's a duty. I take this seriously as a civic duty. And when I resigned, I did wait until there was an election to try to fill my spot. And I went out and tried to find people to fill my spot. It was sad that it was only 15 votes. One of them was mine for the person that filled my spot. I was sorry to hear that. And I think a lot of it stems from abuse by people toward the council members, towards planning board members, and other members in the town governments, is that because it's easy to tear things down. It's very easy to throw rocks at things, but it's hard to build something. And so I find that troubling when that happens. And that's one of the reasons that, again, I bring a calm spirit to the council. As far as timing issues, well, I kind of addressed that. I think it's proper that if someone is going to resign, if it's at all possible, they should coordinate with the next election so that people can pick someone instead of having an appointment by the council be made, because then it's really political. It's not fair.
Thank you. Mark?
Well, I would agree with Mr. Ross that any family issue would take precedence over anything else. If somebody says they need to resign for personal reasons, there really shouldn't be a question about that. You shouldn't really need to ask them why. If it's for personal reasons and a legitimate personal reason, we would have to accept that as a council. If we were to vote our motion to accept the resignation, I personally can't see where I would reject a resignation under those circumstances. That's somebody's personal decision. It is a volunteer position after all. Yes, there is a stipend, but we don't run for the money primarily. I'm speaking for myself. The money is not why we do this. And so is resignation an issue? Sure, because it affects the overall flow of the policy board government, and there is a disruption in that, and for whatever short period of time that is not being resolved, it typically takes about 30 days to find a replacement, and sometimes more in that, so that does become an issue, and hopefully the board moves on very quickly to resolve that, and hopefully comes up with their motions appropriately before they can find another replacement. I also take myself very seriously when anything I take in town here, and I don't intend to resign. I have never missed a meeting that I've ever been assigned to go to, that I've been incumbent upon being at or chaired. I've never missed a meeting in town, and I don't plan to lose any of that perfect attendance at this point either. Does that answer your questions, I believe?
Well,
Resignation is a timing issue.
Resignation is a timing issue. Yes, it can be if a resignation is a timing issue whereby if somebody resigned.
This was a germane question, and I should point out, fairly or unfairly, that each of these two candidates has in their background or in their future a resignation. David, as he pointed out, did resign from a council position, and Mark will have to resign from the budget committee should he be elected. So the answers that they gave were good responses, but the question is pretty germane. Next question. Who's up first?
I am.
Should the police commission be maintained, and why?
Okay, so I'm in favor of maintaining the status quo of the current citizen-based volunteer police commission. I believe they're doing a terrific job right now. There is a perception out there that the previous commissions and moving forward to the current commission, the overall perception is in the papers over the years that the commission is a detriment to the town, and that there's inertia happening, but this current commission provides an independent oversight right now, and they're doing the job right the way they're supposed to be. I am in favor of the current structure of the police commission, provided that there's commissioners in place who are actually doing the job and providing the work that is necessary, which this current commissioner is providing. There has been issues in the past, as we all know, where some previous commissioners or some previous commissions were lacking efficient oversight. And so I looked at it upon whether the previous commissions were overlooking the police department, where in my view the police commission right now is overseeing the police department, and I see that as a major distinction. The current commissioners understand what their very difficult role is right now, and are still very supportive of the police department. Have accomplished some great things in the last year to accomplish the independent audit that was commissioned. And with all of those policy things that went through, they accomplished most of those audit requirements, criteria. The town council at this point, should this warrant article pass, currently has no viable plan in place should this article pass to abolish the police commission.
David?
Well, I'll be picking up right where I left off in 2010, actually, because this is where my term had ended, was the discussions surrounding the police commission. My concern with the commission then remained all through, is that when you have only 3 people entrusted to make a decision, that means only 2 people have to agree. I don't consider that to be really a government body. I find it too easy for things to, even if they're not true, to be perceived as being, good old boy kind of thing. There needed to be more people. My first proposal back then was to increase it to 5 members. That way you need at least 3 people to agree, and would have to have 4 to make a quorum. But that didn't make it through the council. So that's when it was Council Piscatola that motioned for abolishment. And I agreed with that. I said, if we can't increase the number, then let's abolish it and let the council take over the responsibilities. Because just like the fire department runs fine with the fire chief and his staff, there's no commission between us and them. And I see the structure of the 2 departments not to be that different from each other. So I don't see why the council couldn't handle this. And the council is independent. We're all 9 independent citizens of the town of Hooksett. So I don't see how that's worse than having 3. And basically, that's a volunteer position as it stood. And as Mr. Meevil, pointed out, that, being a counselor really is too. $1,500 a year doesn't really pay for the gas. But the thing is that I think it's time. If we can't increase it, then let's do this. Because the voters were cheated out of the chance to vote on this before by the amendment, which I forgave Mike for making, to see if ... That was a total disservice. I'm glad it didn't happen again. So this time, let's let the citizens make their own decision on this.
Okay. Follow-up question, 1 minute. What confidence do you have in the current police commission? David?
Well, I don't know that I would be in a good position to make a thorough answer to that question, okay? Because I think it's a loaded question, and I really don't think it's a good question to ask, frankly. I have confidence in the people there. They're not doing it for money or fame or glory or anything like that. They're doing it, they're volunteers. They do want to do the right thing. That I have absolutely no doubt about. So as far as confidence, again, my concern is that when you only have 3 people and having to deal with this much pressure, it's putting a lot of pressure on the 3 of them. Because each decision is 3 times as hard as any councilor's decision is, because he's only one of 9. But on that commission, you're only one of 3. I think that's the problem I see, is that there's just too much put onto 3 people. And I would say, I guess if I had to say yes or no, I'd say I have confidence in them, because reports are that what's going on is they're doing what they should be doing.
Thank you. Mark?
Well, I feel I'm in an excellent position to judge this. I went to police commission meetings every single month for 4 years. I stopped going basically when before the new chief was hired and after the chief left. I was perhaps one of those people who I attended every single meeting, saw what the current commissioner was doing, saw what the previous commissioners were doing, and commented on every single meeting, just about every single meeting that I went to. Provided public input. And that's what's important. The police commission is a citizen-based commission, required to oversee the Hooksett Police Department with community perspectives. So if people show up to provide their perspectives, which I did, among other people, and sometimes the room was full, and sometimes I was by myself or others. But I've seen the progress over the last 4 or 5 years since I've been there. I've seen it. They've done a fantastic job. They have fixed what was wrong beforehand, and the town is better for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Another follow-up question just got handed to me on the same subject. Mark goes first.
Mm-hmm.
Would you support increasing the number of commissioners to 5?
I would, yes. Is it, how many, 1 minute? 1 minute? Was that what you said?
Take a minute if you need it.
Yes, yes. I believe there's been part of the issues that we've had over the years was that it was always difficult for 2 councilors to get together and not be accused of having a quorum for a meeting. Can't arrive in the same room without having a quorum. So I was with Mr. Ross at a different point in time. I also testified to the legislative committee to increase the board, the commission, from 3 members to 5 members at a particular different time on that. But I did provide that input as well. So yes, I do.
Thank you. David?
Well, I kind of already said that. But no, the police commission, again, the original concept back when was when this town, I think, only had 3 selectmen as well. So perhaps 3 and 3 made sense then, but it doesn't now. It's a big town, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of police officers. Again, I don't see it as a great idea to really put more work onto the council, but I don't see that there's any other way other than increasing the size of the commission to 5. I don't know that that's an option any longer. We'll see. You know, it depends on what the voters say at this point. I would say that if the voters do shoot it down and decide that no, they do want to have the police commission remain intact, then I would, if I'm elected, would probably bring forward a motion to raise the membership to 5 again.
Thank you. Next question, a 2-parter, 3-parter. What process will you use to evaluate the effective allocation of town financial resources, in other words, the budget, to the town needs? Second part of that one is, what process will you use to close the budget gap should the state downshift additional employee pension contributions and other issues to the towns? And the third part is, how will you proactively communicate those financial issues and your solutions to your constituency? David.
Well, the process we've used before is rather tedious, but it works. First, the budget committee does their evaluation of the budget. The council goes through it line by line, evaluating it, asking department heads questions regarding as to what the needs are and what the needs aren't. Obviously, we're, as you know, I'm sure that the investments in the town certainly haven't been returning money like they used to, as was the case when I left the council. I'm not sure how far into the red they've gone. So there are going to be some decisions that have to be made in town, I think, that in order to maintain the level of services, but also not, cost people out of their homes, because we do have a lot of people in this town that are just on the edge, and I would hate to do anything that would push anyone over that edge. The downshifting costs from the state, well, that's something that, I think is also not just handled here in town. It should be handled at the state level. I think going to the State House and testifying has a huge effect. I have had personal effect on changing people's minds in these committee hearings. And so that's something I think the town needs to do. We have to join with other towns as well, because we're not alone in having to suddenly get these costs given to us that weren't supposed to be. These were guarantees by the state, and now all of a sudden they're saying they don't have to guarantee them anymore. So we need to be not just involved at the town decision making, but also at the state level decision making. We need to be lobbying actively. As far as allocating, well, that's what you do with any budget, though. First, you got to take the needs. We got police, we got fire, we got sanitation, we got water and sewer and all that stuff, schools. So, there are some things that the town does that, may or may not be peripheral and unnecessary. Again, I haven't looked at a budget in 3 years, so I couldn't say with any certainty what those things would be, but that's what I foresee, that we're going to probably be cutting something out.
Thank you. Mark?
Sure. Well, I've actually been examining this for the last 5 years. I've been on the budget committee for the last 5 years. I've been the chairman of the budget committee for the last 3 years. So I've presided over these very same issues. And each and every time, each and every year, each and every presentation that comes to the budget committee, I examine and I advise my whole committee to examine needs versus wants. And we ask the department heads, what is the need here? Is this a want or is this a need? Please define, please justify your budget lines. So it's not just about knowing numbers or ledgers. Part of being on the budget committee is asking good probing questions. And by the way, there are 4 openings on the budget committee right now with 4 openings on the ballot. Any one of you who are passionate about the town, any write-ins would get you on the ballot. We'd appreciate your service. To close the budget gap from the downshifting, that is a current issue for this particular year especially. The state downshifted hundreds of thousands of dollars to the town and local town government, so we did have to incorporate those funds for retirement funds and insurances. And so how do we close that? We have to make good decisions and adjust fund balances, and right now we're currently in a default budget, so we're kind of in a tight spot right now. But we're encouraging the proposed budget right now as for the next election here as investments in the town. There are certain things that need to be done in town in spite of the fact that the state downsized these things, the retirement costs. We still have to incorporate them. It's state mandated, have to do it. And so there are issues here that we need to incorporate that. We need to sell it to provide the services to the town as investments.
Okay. A follow-up question, something that you said, David, and I just want to see how you can clarify the issue, because I'm not sure I understand it. And that is, you talked about investment returns. They aren't what they used to be. Specifically, what do you mean when you say that?
The town has a certain amount of money that's always invested in stocks. That's what the trustees do. Yes. In other words, I noticed that in the last few years, the last couple of years on the council, as the economy was crashing in 08 and 09, that our returns were being decimated. And that's money that used to offset tax increases. It's not there anymore.
Okay. So you're
that's
focused in the specific area of invested funds.
Correct.
As opposed to return on investments that are made in roads and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't call those investments myself.
Maybe not a road, but just a suggestion for both of you. I feel like you're answering to me when I ask a question. I'm just facilitating the question.
I just want to see if you're standing up. That's all I'm doing. I'm looking that way, but sometimes I have to look that way.
Don't worry about that.
Okay. You're going to call.
Okay. Anyway. But these are the folks that need to communicate,
Sure.
not me. Next question. How do you proceed when the council votes to support an issue by a 5-4 vote? And you're one of the 4. 1 minute.
Again, to clarify that.
How do you proceed when the council votes to support an issue 5-4 and you're one of the 4 no votes?
The dissenting vote. Am I first?
Yes.
I have to support the will of the majority of the board. So whether I agree with it or not, I have to follow whatever the decision was made through data-driven information and examining all consensus of all perspectives are on the board, and we're not going to win them all. So I offer my information, I offer my perspective, and try to advise them on how I feel about it. If I'm on the losing side of a 5-4 vote, I accept that and we move on.
Thank you. David?
Well, that's once the decision's made, it's made. And you put it to bed and you get on with the next decision. That's really the way that a council should operate, because when you try to undo what's been done, all you're going to do is be counterproductive. You know, either to the other members of the board or to the public. They see insecurity or indecision. Well, wait a minute, how come they're still arguing about this when it's already been put to bed? That's something that has occurred. You know, I've seen it personally, that unnecessary conversations are unnecessary. The job of the council is almost judicial, really. We deal with decisions as they come. Once the decision's made, that's that. Any more discussion or debate on the issue should be put to bed and be done with it. Move on to the next thing so we can get the job done. Because there's a lot that the council has to do. I remember meetings going until 11 o'clock at night, sometimes even later, because of unnecessary conversations.
Thank you. Next question. We agreed to go to 8, Mary? Or thereabouts? Okay, I've got time for 2 or 3 more of these. What criteria will you use to evaluate appointments that the council makes to town committees and commissions? Has multiple parts. Assuming procedures are in place to govern actions by the boards and committees that are appointed, people that are appointed, what should happen when they are not followed? Second part, should land use board members be required to receive proper training in the respective laws and procedures available through the state? And the last part of that of the question is, talk generically about what training should be available to every person who is appointed or elected within Hooksett. 2 minutes. Who had the last one?
I know.
I think I did.
Marcus.
Me? Okay. Okay, so for the criteria to appoint, I'm looking for people who could provide some good feedback and some good become an asset to the board that they're applying for. There is a form that the town has that any applicant needs to fill out and provide their criteria as to how they're qualified for the position. So I'm looking for the most qualified person and that would advance and enhance the board's overall makeup. What not to be followed is, I'm looking for process. I'm always looking at process. As someone who's going to make decisions based on the rules of procedure and the rules of process. Any board or committee has a right to make bad decisions as long as they're following process. But I'm looking for people who will follow the process in every step of the way. There are courses available, to my understanding, through most of the committees. I know the budget committee has a course that's allowed to be taken for the new people who are arriving. And we do have these LGC manuals. The LGC manuals that provide a lot of very valuable information on any official who is elected or appointed, to provide them some background information and give them a jump start before they come onto the board or the committee. So yes, I do believe training is important, and to my knowledge, most of these boards do provide it through the LGC. So I think we've accomplished that at this point. I'm very pleased for my interactions through town. I think we have very good people around town on a volunteer basis for the most part, who provide some very good backgrounds and data information to their appointments and towards performing their duties with due diligence to the citizens.
Thank you. David?
Well, the first criteria I look for anybody that wants to volunteer is, do they really want to volunteer? Do they have their heart in it? Is it something that they look like they really want to do? Because first of all, it's hard to get volunteers, number one, but if you have a volunteer who doesn't have their heart in it, then they're not worth having at all. And I know this, having dealt with them, and not in town, other ways. So that's the first and foremost. If someone really wants to do a good job, the training's available in many facets, especially now. There's online training too as well. People can actually do these courses online for municipal law or land use law, things like that. I still got my collection of books for land use as well. So there's plenty of training out there. Should it be required? It should be encouraged strongly, I say, because again, filling boards, as was pointed out earlier, we have 4 open positions on the budget committee. That's kind of tough. So you want to make it, first of all, you want to encourage people to volunteer. You want people that have their heart in it, that look like they're going to want to do the job, and then give them the tools to do it. If there's any money required for some of these courses, then the town certainly should be paying for that training, absolutely. It's usually very inexpensive anyways. And land use members, well, yes, that's a whole different can of worms because that's almost a legal body, and so there are issues there that have to be handled very carefully and knowledgeably. So, yes, I think that land use appointments should be people that are qualified.
Okay. Next question. What are your thoughts regarding mandatory recycling? David.
Well, unfortunately, I really, and I've had this discussion a few times, that I think it was a huge mistake to bring it forward the way it was, because you know what's going to happen. I'll tell you what's going to happen, is that we've just tied the hands of our recycling department after this vote takes place. The concerns I heard were that they weren't sorting the stuff at the facility. It wasn't the trash, the curbside pickup that was the problem. Beyond that, it wasn't so much a problem of people putting common trash in the recycle bin, because that's a violation anyways, okay? It could be called littering, literally, because we own the barrels. But that wasn't the problem either. The fact that we have over 30% recycling in this town in 1 year is remarkable. If anything, there should be more flyers thanking the people and giving them more instruction, because the education element still isn't there. People still don't know, well, the pizza box, do I have to scrape all the cheese off of it, or do I take the insert out and just put the outer box in? Okay, bottles, do we leave the caps on, take the caps off because there's two kinds of plastic? There are a lot of little things that will speed up the process all the way down the line if people know. You know, granted, they'll take it with the caps on, but if they take the cap off, or don't put it back on the bottle really, we know that at the sorting facility it's going to speed things up. So education, telling people what to do and how to do it, and congratulate them and thank them. You know, encouragement gets you a lot more than punishment every time. You know, any parent will tell you that. And unfortunately, saying that we're going to and because the reading of the article, you've got to read it, it contradicts itself right there. If it's a referendum, it should say referendum, and it doesn't. It says shall. You know, will the town vote to establish mandatory recycling? So a yes vote says that we shall.
Mark?
Well, I recycle. I'm an avid recycler. Since the day one, even before single stream. I remember when single stream was a big issue in town, and even just to get single stream approved was a struggle. Now it's a no-brainer. I wish everybody would recycle. Having said that, there's apparently, from what I talked to Superintendent Diane Boyce about it, there's about 99% of the people who participate, and leaving about 1% who do not. And she said to me yesterday, I was talking to her about this very thing yesterday, she said that we average about 31% of recycle